listening to Cooper Talk.
Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guests. And I got to tell you something, people. We have a guest today who is huge. That's all I'm going to say. This gentleman is part of one of the biggest musical duos in the history of music. And if you don't believe me, look up their sales and their popularity. And from Air Supply, my guest is Graham Russell. How you doing, Graham?
Good morning, Steve. How are you?
Good. I want to start off by asking you, do you ever just sit back and think of the millions and millions of people you have touched with your music? And it goes to weddings, breakups, proms. I mean, my high school sweetheart turned me on to Air Supply. She was a huge fan. This is in 1980. But do you ever just sit back and go, oh my God, I've touched so many people?
You know, I do quite often, actually, probably more often than I should, because, you know, we certainly filled that void in the 1980s. You know, we were the band that, you know, we were perceived as a very romantic band. The music's very romantic, but none of it was by design. It was just by default, really. But I think we certainly filled that void, although that wasn't our intention. Our intention was just to be like any other group, just to, you know, write and record and perform wherever we could. But, you know, gradually over a few years, we became that band that people would listen to for a long time. And I think because of the nature of the music, you know, because it was very simple music, but it had a profound effect on people. But it's a nice thing to have during your career. And I think that's what's kept us there in people's consciousness for so many years, because the music, the songs just don't go away, you know, they just keep coming back. So I think that's what it is. But it's a great thing at the same time, you know.
Now, what got you into music? I mean, as a kid, were you drawn to music? You know, did you see a certain band? I mean, what got you on this path to becoming a great songwriter and musician?
Well, I started writing songs very early. I think I was like 12 years old. And I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what I was doing or how to write a song. I didn't even know they were songs. I just was writing all these things down. And then in 1964, the first band I ever saw live was the Beatles. So, you know, it changed my whole life. And I went, oh, okay, now I get it. And I thought to myself, wow, I'd like to do that. You know, that's right up my street. But, you know, there's a lot of years had to go by, and I got in the trenches. Once I knew that I was writing songs, and once I saw the Beatles, I thought, oh, okay, now it all makes sense. And so I just continued to do it. In the face of a lot of opposition, people would say, oh, you know, you're wasting your time, you know, what are you doing? But I couldn't stop it. I just was compelled to write songs, even at that, as a very young teenager. And of course, now later on, I understood why that was happening, but I didn't at the time because I didn't think about it. I just wanted to do it. I just had to write songs. If I didn't write 3 or 4 songs every single week, I didn't think that I was getting anywhere. You know, I had to keep doing it to get better and to understand how it's done. And so I did that, and I wrote, you know, every single week for years and years. I wrote 3 or 4 songs, and they were probably terrible, you know, but you just keep going. Then you figure it out, and you go, oh, that's kind of nice. And then it's an experience, you know. And I don't think songwriters, certainly like myself, you never really understand how to write a song. It just happens. I mean, I couldn't tell anyone how to write a song. I can tell them how to sit down and what a song contains, but the way it comes about is it's just inspirational. So you can't put a handle on it because it's either there or it isn't. But when it is, it's an incredible feeling, you know. But that feeling when it's not there is terrible, you know, because you think, oh, I'm done. I can't do it anymore. But then, you know, you let it go and then it comes back. So it's kind of that push-pull, love-hate thing that I've grown to love during my career. I just love it. I love songs and I love writing songs.
Well, it's fascinating, because I've done some writing. I used to do comedy, so I would write jokes, and then sometimes you sit there and you write something and you go, this just isn't funny, and then you go, I'm not funny anymore. And then you're about to go on stage and you're going, none of this is funny. And then you get up and it works. For you, if you sat there and wrote a song and just said to yourself, I don't think it's that good, do you just scrap it and say something will come along better? Or how do you get back on the horse? Because we get very frustrated, we get very sensitive when we write something we don't like.
Yeah. Well, after all these years, I've been writing songs now for over 55 years or something. But there are times when I write something and I begin it and I think, oh, that's really cool. And then a few minutes later, it doesn't fire me up anymore. And in that instance, I've learned to let it go and I'll just forget about it. And I probably won't go back to it. I'm a big believer in that inspiration, certainly for me, and I know that different songwriters have different methods, but for me, I'm a big believer that inspiration comes at a certain time, but it comes in for a very short time. And I've learned to know when it's coming and when it's there. It's kind of a feeling that I can't describe. I'm sure it's the same with you if you're writing jokes and things, which I could never do. I can't imagine sitting down and writing a joke. But I know when it's there, and I want to go to my piano and I want to play my guitar. And the instrument, the piano or guitar, is just full of ideas, and I'm just the medium. I have to coax it out of the instrument, and I've become very good at that when I know that it's there, because the for me floats around, and I can hear it and I can feel it's there, and then I'll kind of coax it out. And once it comes out, it has to happen very quickly for me, because I know that it's going to go. And if I don't utilize it while it's there, it's going to get fed up with me and it'll leave. And so consequently, I write very quickly. I write my songs really quickly because of that, because I'm not worried, but I think, well, if I don't get this song out, it's going to go. But once I've got the dots from the instrument, if you like, then when it goes, I can join those dots, but I need all the information first. And it's an incredible moment when you've got a song that's just going to be really cool. And I get really excited, and sometimes I stop, sometimes I'm brought to tears, because I know it's going to be a great song. And I just love that process of getting inside the song and writing the lyrics as I'm writing the music. And it's a great thing. But to answer your question, how do you get back on that track if you feel it's not going anywhere? I've also learned over the years to not bother about it, because if it's not there, it's not there. And I'm not the kind of person that will persevere with a song and say, God, I need to write a song, it's got to come. I'm the opposite. If it's not there, it's not there for me, and I'll just walk away and I'll put my guitar down. I may not play it for a week, but I know when it's time to play it. So I've learned the machinations of my muse, if you like. And I know when it's there, when it's not, and when it's playing with me, and when it wants me to just play. Sometimes it's nice just to sit at the piano and just play with no real goal in mind. And it's funnily enough, when that happens, I always write something. I've learned to, as I said, to let it go. You can't hang on to a song and force it. It's like the farmer that wants his crops to grow faster, so he pulls them out of the ground when they're a little seed, and of course it destroys everything. So I've learned that over the many, many years and experience. I've kind of learned how to deal with it,
Now, is there any songs in Air Supply's history that when you wrote it, you knew it was going to be a hit, and it came to fruition and became a hit? And is there any ones that when you wrote it, you said, hell yeah, this is going to be a hit, and then you went, right, what the hell happened?
I think the first song was our very first song we ever recorded, and we were still in Superstar, which was Love and Other Bruises. And it really wasn't released in the US, only on an album many years later. But that was our first Australian hit. And when I wrote that song, I thought, yeah, this has really got something. It's just got that X factor, if you like. And another one was All Out of Love. I knew when I finished that song, and that only took half an hour to write, I knew that had something. It had that factor, that hidden factor again. And I know when a song's got that because I've learned, once again, it's experience, I've learned how to recognize it. I haven't learned how to create it, because if I knew how it arrives, I would do it in every song, but it doesn't. Some songs, they're all different, but when a song's got that feeling about it, I know, and I get chills. And I remember with All Out of Love, I thought, yeah, this is really going to be cool. It's got something. And in the original version of that song, there was a 90-second orchestral piece in the middle. And that was the part that I really liked. And when we went to the studio to record it, the producer said, oh, we've got to leave that part out. It's too long, and he was right. So we trimmed it down, and we ended up with the song that everyone knows. But I was really bummed about the instrumental piece because it was orchestral and it was really cool. It was like a movie, very fast and epic. And I had to lose that. And I thought, oh, no, we're losing half the song. But we weren't. We were making the song even better, which is the song everybody knows now. But it's funny. I do get that feeling when I'm writing a song, and I just know that it's got something, and it's a great feeling. That's the reward. The reward with songwriting for me isn't monetary or fame or any of that stuff. It's just that feeling, knowing you've created something that you hope is going to last for a long time.
Now, you said you wrote that song in 30 minutes. Now, yeah. When you do something like that, because that's an amazing short time to write a great song, do you sit there and start leaving and second guessing yourself, saying, okay, I got to add to it? Like, how people write in drafts. When you write something in 30 minutes, do you ever just sit there and go, that was too easy, I have to go back and fix it? Or how do you handle that?
Well, once again, I kind of know. For instance, when I sit at a piano and that muse is there and I know something's going on, when I get that feeling, I don't immediately sit at the piano because I want to make sure I've got my recorder on, I've got a pen and paper, I want to have all my tools with me because I'm going to need them. But when I finally sit at the piano, and it may be a few minutes later, I don't think, I just let it go and I just start playing. And I have no idea what I'm going to play or when I'm going to play it or what chords are going to follow what. I just play it and it's all there. If there's a verse, like for instance, and All Out of Love, I'm lying alone with my head on the phone. I mean, after that, the chorus just had to come in. And I didn't even think about the chorus. I just let it fall out. And that's the way it came. And I like to write that way because, once again, because of inspiration striking. It's like fishing, you got that bait in the water, then suddenly that fish bites and you got to reel it in. And it's kind of like that with me. But that's the way I write. And a lot of other writers that I know, they're all different. They all have a different technique that's unique to them. But that's the way I like to do it. And when I've written a song, for instance, very quickly, I'll stop and I know it's on my recorder and I think, God, I thought that was great, but when I play it back, maybe it's not going to be great. And so I go, oh, God, I can't listen to it right now because it may be terrible. But, of course, when I listen back and I go, oh, yeah, it's all there. And then I flush it all out. Once the song is there, the chords and usually the lyrics, then I'll go and tweak everything and maybe change a word here and there. And then I'll know what chords I'm playing. I go, oh, that's a weird chord. And then I'll just go and do that, So it's such a fun thing to do. It really is. And I can't really describe it. I just love it to death, And I'm so fortunate that I was chosen to be one of those. I mean, there are millions of songwriters, but, I'm able to do what I love to do and to earn a living and to, carry on with writing more and more songs, which I want to do. I'd like to write another 1,000 songs before I'm not around anymore.
Now, when you write, because, Russell is, you sing with Russell. When you're writing, do you, I'm sure it's changed over the years, but do you envision his voice as you write? Or do you just write lyrics and then say, when we go to play this, we'll figure out who will sing what and so on?
Right. That's a good question. Normally, every time if I write a song, I'll record it. I'll go and do a demo of it pretty quickly. And I usually end up playing most of the instruments, or I'll call somebody in that I use frequently. And I'll do a demo of it. And so consequently, I'm singing everything. And then when I don't send it to Russell till it's kind of in great shape. And I'm singing it. But if it's really high, usually I don't sing it. I can't get up very high. I leave that to Russell. And then I'll send it to him and I'll say, okay, what do you think about this? And always he'll say, wow, this is great. And often he'll say, I think you should sing that there. And I'll say, well, I think you should sing it. So instead of the other one, normally groups are trying to fight for the spotlight and for who's going to sing the lead. But that doesn't interest me at all. I just want to write the songs. And so I usually try to get Russell to sing as much as he can. But often it's the two of us. And an example, when we were recording All Out of Love, I wanted Russell to sing the whole thing. And the producer, Harry Maslin, Russell went in to sing it, and it sounded pretty good. And Russell said, God, it's not sitting with me. He said, you should sing it, the verses. And I said, well, it's a little high for me, which it was. But anyway, I went in and I tried it. And Harry, the producer, and Russell said, that's it. He said, you got to sing it. So I said, okay. But I said, Russell has to sing the choruses, which he did. But the two of us singing created that symmetry. And it was like that in Lost in Love too, where I sang the melody and Russell sang the harmony. But together we really created that third indivisible part that you can't describe. So that's how we work in the studio. So there's no real rule about who's going to sing what. It's just whatever sounds better, And Russell's the first one to say that, Sometimes it suits my voice. Sometimes his is better. More often than not, it's his voice. But I never write for him or for myself. I just write the song. And quite often I go, oh, wow, this is high. The key's high. But if I try to bring the key down, it loses something. And you wouldn't think it would, because it's the same song in a different key, but it loses some impetus. It loses a factor. And so I have to leave it usually in the original key. And we figure out a way who's going to sing it. Usually it's Russell.
Now, you've been writing songs for years. When you guys met, I know you met in Australia, which you had moved to Australia, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Now, you had met. Did you think, was there instantaneous that you said, we're a mesh? Like, it's like sometimes people just know. Did you guys know that you were right for each other at that time?
I think we did. There was something going on, how it happened. We were in Jesus Christ Superstar, and we all the whole company, there was 34 of us, I think, all sat down for the first sing-through with the musical director. And we sang Heaven on Your Mind, Jesus Christ Superstar, because it's the easiest thing in the show. And we all sang, and it just sounded amazing, And I was, the green guy. I'd never been in a show before. I really didn't think I could sing that well. But this guy next to me, when we sang, just had this voice that just cut through like a knife. And after that rehearsal, I turned to him and I said, wow, you've got an amazing voice. And he said, oh, thank you, And I said, my name's Graham Russell. And he said, oh, thank you. He said, my name's Russell Hitchcock. And he said, we've got the same name. And at that moment, something happened. He was just super nice, but I didn't know at that moment, but he and I were pretty much the only two people that didn't know anybody in the show. In shows, as I learned quickly, people from other shows they keep working in shows. So a lot of the cast knew each other, except him and I. We didn't know anybody. So we were kind of the ugly ducklings in the corner that nobody wanted to know. And we really were. We were kind of freaked out a bit. We didn't know what was going on. And, we had the first dance moves. Neither of us were accomplished dancers by any shot of the imagination. But we started the dance moves, and I fell over in about 5 minutes. I fell over and sprained my ankle really bad. And I thought, that figures, I'm out of the show, the first day. But Russell, after the vocal rehearsal, Russell came to my aid, and he picked me up because I couldn't put weight on it. And he took me over to a chair, and I had it bandaged, And I thought, God, I'm out of the show. But he was the first one to come to my aid. And the producer of the show came over to me, and I thought he was going to fire me. And he said, you're going to be fine. Just don't do anything today, and just keep it, look after it, put weight on it and strap it up. And I was fine, but that went a long way that he came to my rescue, but we became very good friends very quickly. I mean, we figured out we were both Beatles fans, and we both saw them live in 1964, which I thought was an incredible coincidence. And we're born in the same month, 3 days apart. So we had a lot going for us. But at that moment, when I went into Superstar, I had a kind of a plan. I thought, well, I'm going to be in this show for maybe 2 years. I've got 2 years to really create something. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I need to create something because I didn't want to go back to my former employment. I mean, I was delivering bread in a van, I didn't want to go back to that. I thought this is my stepping stone to do something. So I had 18 months. But when I met Russell, I thought to myself, that's the first sign, because I didn't have a lot of confidence in my voice. I was never a lead singer. I'm a songwriter that sings, but Russell is a lead singer. And I was very aware of that. And so I thought, here's the first chess move on the board, we became great friends, and we started to sing within a few days. We were singing some of my songs, and we just got on great together, and that was really the beginning of it. And once we got to know each other really well, and we were singing together, we were kind of inseparable. We in the boys' chorus room, we sat next to each other, and we were singing all the time. We were singing all kinds of songs.
Now, when you first met, was it hard to sit there and share your music with him? Because, it's something new to you. I mean, because you're saying you're sharing it with someone you met and you respect. Was it hard, and were you worried what he would think?
At first I thought, well, maybe he won't like this song or like my songs, but he did straight away. In fact, I was playing a song which became our first single there. I was just playing it in the dressing room on my own, and there was nobody around. And Russell walked in, and our chorus dressing room held about 12 guys. There was nobody there, and so I got my guitar out, and then in comes Russell, and he says, "What's that song?" He says, "I haven't heard that before." I said, "It's one of my songs, And he said, "Wow!" And he jumped in and he started singing with me. He started singing a harmony. The same way that we do harmonies now, we don't plan it out or write it out. We just do it. It's kind of a second nature. But he jumped in, and as soon as he jumped in on the song, it just sounded so good. I went, "Oh wow, there's something going on here." And then gradually, the guys would come back in one by one, and they'd all sit around and they say, "Wow, you guys sound really good." And we kind of knew straight away that we just sounded really good. When you hear Simon and Garfunkel, certainly in their earlier years, just the two of them in particular, they sound amazing. It was something like that. It was almost like we'd been singing together for a long time, but we really hadn't. That was the first time. And yet people were coming in the dressing room and sitting around and going, "Wow, you guys sound amazing." So we had a lot of confidence straight away. But I've never been shy about playing a new song to people, because I'd done it since a young teenager. Even at home, I'd get my sisters and I'd say, "Oh, I just wrote another song. I want you to listen to it." So I wasn't shy about playing songs to people. It was quite the opposite. I wanted to. So I was very forward, and then I'd say, "Okay, I've written another song," and he'd say, "Well, let me hear it." And this just went on for the whole time in Superstar, until we created a little act together, because Superstar in those days carried a lot of weight, the name of it. And I used to call around and say, "My name's Graham Russell, and I'm with Superstar," and they go, "Oh, wow." I'd say, "I've got a little act, and we'd love to come and play, in your club late after the Superstar would finish." So we were working all the time after Superstar. We had this little act, and we sounded great, and people really liked it. So already we were getting experience. It's, when I look back at it now, it's almost as if it was predestined that we start working together straight away. Because during our early career, we were so lucky. We had our first record. We put our first record out. It went straight to number one. The album came out. We made an album in a week. The album came out. The album goes to number one. Rod Stewart comes to Australia to do a national tour, and we had the number one album and single. So we got to open for Rod Stewart because we were the hit band of the moment. And you got to remember, we were only 3 months old at this point, the band. We were opening for the biggest act in the world, and we were freaked out. We were like, "Whoa!" So we go and play our first show in Adelaide for Rod, and we come back in our dressing room, and Rod's in our dressing room, and he says to us, he said, "Hi, he said, you sound great." He said, "I'd love you to open for me next year in the US." And we're like, what? We thought he was being making a joke, but he wasn't, and we did, and we did it, and so we were kind of thrown to the lions straight away because Russ and I both thought this. We needed to get experience. We needed to pull it together, become good with our instruments, and create a show because of what was in store for us later on. But of course, we had no idea that was coming. But that's what we thought. We're in Superstar, then we're opening for Rod. Then a couple of years later, we had more hits in Australia. Then we came to the US, and then it just exploded. So it was the weirdest journey, It really was.
Well, you started in Superstar, but I know you write musicals now. Is that because you remember where you got your start? Is that like paying homage to your beginnings? Because if it wasn't for Superstar, you would have never met, and you don't know what your career would have been, but Air Supply wouldn't have been what they are.
Yeah, it was definitely Superstar that triggered that in myself. I played Peter, one of the apostles that is in the Garden of Gethsemane, according to the Bible and all that. And it's, the three apostles lie on stage, and because they're pretending to be drunk, while Jesus is singing this prayer to God, which is the most beautiful piece of music, Gethsemane. I'm sure you've heard it, but it's just amazing. So I used to be lying asleep, pretending to be asleep, and I'd have my ear to the stage, and the bass and the strings of this song, I would hear it every night, and it would just fill my whole body. And sometimes I'd be in tears, and that was every night. So I really got a big dose of the musical genre, and it never went away. And I thought, God, one day I'm going to do this too. I can write musicals, maybe not as good as Lloyd Webber, but I need to do that. And so I started even in those days, but now I'm doing it with a different feeling. Now I'm doing it because I love it. I haven't had any great success yet, but that's not the important thing. I just love writing musicals now.
So when you write a musical, are you doing the lyrics and the score, and then someone else gives you the story, or how does that all mesh together? Like, how do you work with a producer and a director, I'm guessing?
I don't write the story, no. I write the music and the lyrics. But what I've found really interesting for me in this stage of my career. I love writing music for a story that somebody gives me. Like when I agree to write another musical with whoever, I have to get inspired by the story first. And if I like the story, I go to another level where I start thinking about it. And then once I get my own green flag, I'll go, okay, I'm going to start on this. But I love getting a scene and there's certain things happening in the scene. And then I create the music around that scene. And I really like that. It's totally different than writing for a rock and roll band. It's more difficult, I think, with the musical genre, because you have parameters, you have boundaries, and you have to project the story forward. You can't just write a song and stick it in and change the characters' names. You have to think about the scene. So it's a lot more intellectual, I think. Whereas a song for a rock and roll band, or for Espla anyway, there really are no parameters. The canvas is blank, and so I can create whatever I want, but the musical is it's a little more military. You have to follow certain rules and regulations, but still have the freedom to create something really unique and bizarre.
Now, in the early days, Clive Davis was very involved with you guys. How did you meet him? And what part? Because I just watched a documentary on him, and he's just an amazing person. How did that come about? What was the relationship?
Well, in 1980, actually it was 79. Lost in Love had already been a hit in Australia 2 years before, and it was a hit, but we still weren't making any money. And I went to England to try and sell some songs, and there was this publishing convention in Cannes, in the south of France. And it sounds very exotic, but for me it wasn't. I went over on a ferry, and I was in a really cheap little grotty hotel, and I just wanted to try and sell some songs. I was destitute. I was broke. Russell was back in Australia making sandwiches and working in that kind of industry. And I got there and I got food poisoning, and I was laid up for like 3 days, and I couldn't get out of bed. It was terrible. I felt awful. I wanted to die. And by the time I recovered enough to get out of bed and walk down the street, the convention had finished. It had gone. I'd missed it. I'd missed my opportunity. And there were all these magazines blowing down the street like a Tarantino movie, old papers and wrappers and things. And I thought, oh, that's great. There's nothing going on. The place was deserted. And I found this magazine, either a record world or Record Mirror or something. It's like Billboard, it's gone now. And I picked it up because it was free. And it says, Mid-Am, was a great success, all this. And on the front cover of the magazine, it said Lost in Love, destined to go top 5. And I thought, oh, that's great. There's a band now that's written a song called Lost in Love that's going to be a big hit. So I'm screwed, And it said, turn to page 5 for details. So I thought, okay, I'll see what's going on. I turned to page 5 and there's a picture of Russell and myself. So unbeknown to us, Clive had heard Lost in Love. It came on his desk, I don't know how, in the myriad of singles he must be listening to. He'd heard it. He'd made a deal with our management and our record company to license the song, and he'd put it out, nobody knew. And I thought, that's really weird. And I got a bit annoyed. I thought, God, it's my song, and how can they put it out without me? So I called Clive up, and I reversed. I didn't have any money. I reversed the charges. I said, I want to speak to Clive Davis. I knew he was, kind of famous, but I didn't know to what degree or what he really did. And I called Arista in New York. I reversed the charges, and I said, I want to speak to Clive Davis. And they said, who is it? I said, it's Graham Russell from Air Supply. And they put me through to him. And they said, hello. He says, this is Clive Davis. I said, this is Graham from Air Supply. I just saw a thing that, you've released Lost in Love. He says, yeah. He said, He said, where are you? I said, I'm in Cannes, you know. He said, what are you doing there? He says, get back to Australia and you've got to make an album. He said, Lost in Love's going to go all the way. And I went, what do you mean? He said, it's going to be a huge hit. He said, you've got to get out of there right now. So I managed to get on a plane, but I wanted to make sure this was for real. So I went the long way around because it's cheaper. I stopped just about every port in the world. And I went to New York, and I was able to go to Arista, and I just went up. And I remember going to his office, and I said, I'm Graham Russell, can I see Clive Davis? And they said, do you have an appointment? I says, no. And Clive comes out, and he says, what are you doing here? And I said, I wanted to meet you, make sure it's real, you know. So we had lunch, and he said, and he just told me what he thought was going to happen. And he said, you got to get back to Australia and make the album, which I did. But we had a great conversation. But that was my first introduction to Clive. And funnily enough, about 2 weeks ago, we did that Quarantunes, which is Clive's show. I don't know if you were aware of that.
Yeah.
He had it was a Zoom thing. And I haven't spoken to Clive for maybe 20 years. And then suddenly, I was driving near my home 2 weeks ago. I get this phone call from New York. And I didn't recognize the number, so I thought it was a spam. And he called me back. So I picked it up. And he said, this is Clive Davis. And I went, whoa. And he said, is this Graham? I said, yeah. So we had a chat. I said, how are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And he said, will you come on my show, you know, like in a few days, which we did. You know, we did a live thing. But it was weird how I haven't spoken to him for 20 years. Then suddenly he just came out of the woodwork. And so, but he was really nice. He said, you know, we haven't spoken to each other for a long time. But he said, but now we're in touch again. And here's my cell number. He said, call me anytime. And we did the show and we chatted, and I called him the next morning. And so it was nice to reignite that relationship, because he was so instrumental in our success. I mean, majorly so. He just told you what was going to happen, and it happened. You know, he said Lost in Love's going all the way, and then he picked All Out of Love as the next single, and he just said, yeah, it's going to happen. He says, you're on a streak now. He says, you're going to go all the way. And he was right.
What do you think what was it about your sound that America just snapped you up? I mean, and I know you have Clive behind you, and their quality, their good songs. But what do you personally think when you look back and go, here's why we made it? It was before lots of videos. You know, it wasn't the 80s generation. I mean, like later in the 80s, all the videos made it. What do you think made you guys just become really loved?
Yeah. You know, I think about that. We both do quite often. I think there are a few factors involved. One factor certainly was it was January in a new decade. And historically, as I found out later on, people are ready for something at the turn of a decade, you know. Lost in Love was released, I think, January 17th. So it was right there. It was a new decade. Everybody was ready for something different, and we were at the top of the list. And Clive put that record out, and obviously he shopped it to everyone. But everybody just was attracted to it. It was like a magnet. You couldn't listen to a radio. You couldn't turn a radio on without hearing Lost in Love every few minutes. But I think too, we were from Australia. We were it was the beginning of that Australian craze, if you like. There was Olivia Newton-John, who was huge. And, you know, it was the sun, the beach, Australia. It hadn't really been exploited, Australia. We were from the other side of the world, from down under. So that was attractive. But at the same time, you know, I think we were very innocent. We really didn't know what we were doing. We worked in Australia in the trenches, you know, in pubs and stuff for 4 years. But in the US, when we came there, we were like all eyes. It's like, wow, you know, this is amazing, you know. And we were just innocent. The innocence, I think, really helped us out. Plus, the thing with Lost in Love, the record, it just sounded so good. You couldn't deny it. You know, when it came on, when you hear that guitar intro, it just pulled you in. And I don't know why, because It's probably the simplest song I've ever written. There's only 4 chords in the whole song. There's no bridge. There's just a verse and a chorus. And it just keeps going round and going round. And if it's not the verse, it's the chorus. And it just rolls, like if Clive said to us, he said, people will play this song when they're in their car on the freeway. And he said, it's just a breezy song. And people just went for it. And I don't know any other reason why they would, because they didn't know who we were. So it wasn't like, oh, this guy's handsome, that guy's tall, that guy's not so tall. They didn't know who we were. They didn't know what we looked like. It was the song. But then when we came over to tour, then they got to put the face to the music. So that kind of propelled it even more, I think, because now, that's those guys, One guy's really tall and blonde. The other guy's is not so tall and he's dark-haired, So we kind of matched.
What is it like? And I'm sure you've seen this countless times, to be on stage, and I know you've seen women crying because they're just so enthralled with you, or that song just hits them. How do you do you ever sit there and go, like that reaction you just gave me, you laugh? Do you ever sit there and go, it's sort of funny to me? I mean, what goes through your mind?
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, we ask the fans why they do that, or why they keep coming to see us. Some people have seen us over 1,000 times, and we know a lot of the fans' faces from the stage into the audience, and we acknowledge them, and they just have a great time. But I think if they're crying, and they do, or feeling that those emotions, we just trigger it. It's not about us that they're crying. They're reliving emotions that have made them cry in the past. Because if there's a beautiful song, for instance, if I was to hear Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, which is so beautiful, I would start crying, because it's that kind of thing. Not that we're anything like Beethoven, but I think our music certainly triggers emotions. And that's not, once again, by design. I don't sit down and say, okay, I know that if I put these 2 chords together, they're going to cry. That's the furthest from the truth. I think because the songs are very genuine, they come from a genuine place. I never sit down to try and put a song together, to create a song with pieces. I don't do that. So the songs have an entirety from beginning to end. And I think they feel that. They feel that the vocals are very passionate. We really mean it. We're not faking it or trying to say to people, hey, we love you, man, and all that. I mean, we really enjoy and love being on stage. And it's the audience that has allowed us to do that, because they've supported us for 45 years. And we're very aware that it could be a million other bands, but they support us and they love what we do. So it creates this fission. We love them too, and they come to see us, and we just try to give them the best we can, So it's this beautiful relationship between them and us that's existed from the beginning of our career. And I don't know if I'm sure there are many artists that have that relationship, but not as many as you would think. I'm feeling,
Now, last year you came out with the Lost in Love Experience.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
Last year you came out with the Lost in Love Experience, and you played with an orchestra. Now, it seems like all these bands are now playing with the Prague Philharmonic. What drew you to that, and what kind of experience was that? Especially because you wrote the songs, and now they're being played differently.
Yeah. Well, I think for any rock and roll band, if there's a band that songs are very, very conducive to an orchestra, it's ours, And I love playing with orchestras. And, we'd done live albums before, but not like this. And we were in Vegas, and a friend of mine came up to me, and he was visiting from England, and he'd worked with the Prague Symphony, who are a famous European orchestra, one of the best in the world. And he said, yeah, I've just been working with the Prague Symphony, writing some charts for them. And I said, wow, that's amazing. And I said, I'd love to work with them too. And he said, are you serious? Because I can hook you up if you want to work with them. And I said, really? So he got hold of them, and they had 3 days or 4 days available, like in the 6 months from that time. And so we just booked them, and we went over there, and it was incredible because, I'd never been to Prague before. And Prague's a very old city, of course. And the studio which is their studio, was a very famous studio. Now, on the walls as you're going in, there's all these awards like Oscars and things. And there was one in particular that really struck me because my favorite movie is Lawrence of Arabia, and the score is just breathtaking. And it was recorded in this room. And the guy told me that. He said, Lawrence of Arabia was scored right here. And so that really filled me with this real desire to bring something more modern like Air Supply to this beautiful, rich, cultured city, and especially the studio. And it was just a great time from the beginning to end. And, a lot of them didn't speak, none of the players spoke English. There was the choir master and the musical director were there and the conductor, and they spoke kind of broken English. But when we played the songs back, before we had charts and everything, and they were looking over the charts, and they would go, and they go, oh yeah, I know this song. And so it was a great symbiotic thing going on, and we just had a great time. But when we got back to the US, there's always a danger that wherever you go to record, and then if you go out of the country and then come back, that it's not going to sound the same for whatever reason. And I've had that experience a few times. And I thought, God, I hope it's going to come back. And so once again, we were in the studio, and it was a very weird time. I thought, okay, push play, let's see what we got. And it just sounded incredible. And I'm really very proud of this album because it's so big sounding and so lush. But it's how I've always wanted to sound. And we've played with orchestras before, but I've never felt it like this one. And I thought, this is it. And I thought, we'll always have this album, the Experience album. And the reason why it's called The Experience, the Lost in Love Experience, because we do talk to our fans a lot. We have meet and greets during the day and evening during a show day. And I would say to them, why do you keep coming back? What is it? Is it the song? Is it Russell's voice? Is it whatever, the lights? And they say, it's not one thing. They say it's everything. It's that moment. And they would say, it's an experience that you step into when you come in the theatre. And I went, that's interesting. So we said, then it's the Lost in Love Experience because it's a live record. But it's how we want to sound, and how we always strive to sound is just like that record. So really the fans gave us this album,
Now, is it harder? Is it harder for you to tour now because you've been around for a long time and you're older? I mean, is it, I think
sure.
You guys do a lot of shows. You're not like you're sitting there, you're not doing 10 shows a year. You probably do over 100 shows. Well, you did. Is it harder now? Like, what's the difference touring now than 20 years ago?
Well, I think 20 years ago, I just turned 70 a couple of weeks ago. So, it's a little harder to tour now because I think, although we do tour nicely now, we go in a nice way. We very rarely do private planes. We go commercial, but we get nice seats and we're okay. But there's a lot of people not touring, but on vacation. There's a lot of people. Every plane, until now, of course, every plane is full. It's always full when we're on tour. The airports are always full, and it's kind of a hustle and bustle, and people are trying to eat, and it never used to be like that, but now it is, and so it's a little different, and it can be exhausting, and you think, well, how can it be exhausting if you're just flying around and driving and traveling? But when people like relations or whatever, or friends come out, they'll say for like a day or 2 days, they say, I don't know how you do it, because they get totally exhausted. So you've got to get into a mindset, and you've got to be fit to travel these days because it can be exhausting, you just get into a zone. But even though it is more tiring now, because we're older, I think that's the big factor. So you have to balance that out with eating well and exercising and making sure you don't do weird things, and that's the secret, I think. But now, having not played a show since March 18th, I'm definitely would like to play again, simply because that's what I do best. I like to play, and we will soon, I'm sure, but it'll be different. I don't know how it'll be, but it's that necessary evil that you do. It's the older you get, the more difficult it gets,
Now, has the quarantine affected your creativity?
No, actually, quite the opposite, because I started work on a new musical in late March when the virus hit and we knew we were off. I started the musical and I finished it about 3 weeks ago. So it's been great for me, but I know a lot of other people have, it's been different, they're kind of bored and don't know what to do with themselves. I talked to some of the band occasionally and they're all going crazy, and they say, well, what are you doing? I mean, it's okay for me because I've been at home and writing on my piano and guitar. So it's been great. And recording, I've recorded most of these songs for a new album. So it's been great for me. But I'm fortunate also because where I live, I live in the mountains, so I've got a lot of space around me. I don't have to be cautious about people around me because there aren't any.
Right. Well, before we go, I want to ask you, what is your favorite Air Supply album, and can you even pick your favorite Air Supply song or a song that means something right here to you?
Well, I think my favorite Air Supply album is the Lost in Love album, the first American one, we always call it, the one with Lost in Love and All Out of Love and Chances, because I think it's a great record and I'm really proud of it. And, when Lost in Love came out and it was a big, big hit, the album wasn't out for a while. And then the album came and, we had 3 big hits off that album. But often, and still now, I would sit down and play the whole album, and it's a really great album. It's not Pink Floyd or Led Zeppelin or anything like that, but it's a great record, and it's very indicative of who we are and who we were at that time. That is full of great songs that I'm really proud of, and my favorite song is All Out of Love. Certainly, it always has been, because it was really. Well, first of all, it was the first song I ever wrote on a piano. And secondly, it was the first song where I had that feeling we were talking about early in the interview, where you just know it's going to be a hit song. You just know it. And so it was the first one of that kind. And I've always had a soft spot for it. And of course, now, all these years later, I certainly do, because it's been a great, it's just been a song that's really given me my lifestyle and allowed me to create and to keep writing songs without worrying about finances or where the next dollar is coming from. It's been very kind to me, and it's a song that, more importantly, it's a song that the whole world has embraced. I mean, you can go to any country in the world, and if you say I'm all out of love, they're going to finish the song for you. And that, when we were the first band to tour in China, in 96, I think. And we were very concerned. We thought, it was great to be in China, that forbidden communist place. And we went there, and when we started to play, they just sang every word to every song. But we always close our show with All Out of Love. And when we did that, because they had traffic lights in a lot of Asian countries, for the audience, it's red is you don't clap, green you can clap, but then amber, and it sounds weird, right? Amber, you tone it down, then stop, you stop. The traffic lights, for All Out of Love, yeah, it's great. And then the amber came and then the stop, but they wouldn't stop clapping. and they weren't allowed to stand up. There were maybe 50 soldiers around the arena, armed with AK-47s, and the crowd weren't allowed to stand up, you know. But when All Out Love came on, they stood up, you know, and the soldiers, they go, "Call up, what do I do? What do I do?" Everybody stood up. So it was kind of a breakthrough for us. And it's nice to know that it was that song that kind of broke through those barriers. And we got into a lot of trouble when we got back to the hotel. There was all kind of dignitaries saying, "Oh, you know, you can't do this, you can't do that. The people of China don't allow that." And I said, "Well, you know, we're not Chinese."
Well, Graham, I want to thank you for taking time today. I'm a fan. People, if you don't know who Air Supply is, you're not listening to my show, because I know everyone who listens to my show knows who damn Air Supply is. So people, go buy their albums, look up their music. When they come in concert, it's funny, my friend was supposed to see you guys on a tour. My friend Carrie Stubman was supposed to see you guys on a cruise, but the cruise got canceled. This year. So people go see them. And check me out at my website, coopertalk.net. Email me, cooper@coopertalk.net. Follow me on Twitter @CooperTalk. And remember, I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guests. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Thank you.